When France was exhausted by fire and faith, a soldier king walked into the cathedral and changed the country's destiny. This is the Bourbon story: war, compromise, statecraft, magnificence, and ultimately, revolution. Welcome to History Without Sleep. If you liked my video, then please like, comment, and subscribe the channel. The year is 1589. France, riven by the wars of religion, staggers under the heavy feet of armies and the heavier weight of sectarian hatred. Out of that ruin steps a pragmatic, stubborn soldier, Henry of Navarre. He is a leader hardened by campaigning, a Huguenot who understands his crown will mean more than victory on the field. It will demand sacrifice. Henry's mornings in those years are not ceremonial. He awakens before dawn to maps, letters, and messengers who bring news of sieges, betrayals, and fragile loyalties. His court is a wartime camp: dispatches, saddled horses, and rough counselors who value courage over etiquette. The decisive choice comes not on a battlefield but at the altar. To be accepted by a France overwhelmingly Catholic, Henry converts, a political conversion that changes the map of Europe. The edict that follows will attempt to hold together a torn nation, and Henry's rule will be defined by pragmatic compromise, strong defense, and careful reconciliation after years of war. Henry needs repair more than glory. He surrounds himself with ministers who can translate vision into accounts. The Duke of Sully becomes not only minister but the state's chief mechanic, draining marshes, repairing taxes, and restoring trade. Henry's simple breakfasts, bread and watered wine, become a symbol, a king who will walk among his people and understand their needs. Days become practical: inspections of fortifications in the morning, meetings with merchants and engineers in the afternoon, satellite visits to manufactories and ports. The royal household transforms. Courtiers who once only performed now participate in the running of a recovering state. Henry's mixture of hands-on governance and political charm rebuilds confidence and lays the administrative foundation for Bourbon power. Henry's most consequential decision is to enshrine toleration, not as abstract ideal but as political tool. The Edict of Nantes grants rights to Protestants while preserving Catholic dominance. It is a fragile piece, a legal instrument to prevent renewed war. The edict reshapes daily governance. Local governors manage delicate balances. Religious leaders negotiate parish rights. Magistrates translate toleration into precedent. Some hailed it as genius, others called it betrayal. But the edict buys France time the Bourbons will spend centralizing power and modernizing the state. Politics and love entangle. Henry's marriage to Marie de' Medici brings Italian culture, patronage, and complexity into the French court. Her arrival injects Renaissance tastes, artists, musicians, and the new language of courtly display, but also foreign influence that some nobles resent. At the same time, dynastic security matters. The birth of his son, the future Louis XIII, secures continuity, but it also shifts the court from Henry's pragmatic openness toward the ceremonial, hierarchical model that will later crystallize under Versailles. The royal nursery becomes a political instrument as much as a domestic refuge. On a spring afternoon, Henry IV dies, the victim of a fanatic's blade. France grieves, but the polity must continue. A 9-year-old Louis XIII inherits the crown, and Marie de' Medici steps into the breach as regent. Her mornings are dominated by strategy, securing nobles, placating factions, and keeping foreign powers at bay. Yet Marie's Italian entourage and unfamiliar ways create friction. The regency is an exercise in managing court politics, Italian habits colliding with French tradition, ministers angling for influence, and the looming question of how to hold the country together when the monarch is a child. As Louis grows, the machinery of monarchy needs steady hands. Enter the clerical statesman who will remake the Bourbon monarchy, Cardinal Richelieu. His work is not immediate spectacle but long administrative engineering, intelligence networks, centralized command, suppression of factional militaries, and the elevation of state interest above private noble power. Richelieu's mornings begin with dispatches, his afternoons with strategic councils, his evenings with the pruning of aristocratic overreach. He will turn the crown from a collection of personal ties into a national instrument capable of projecting power across Europe. Louis XIV's early reign is shadowed by regency politics and noble unrest. He matures in a court where ritual grows heavier, but statecraft sharpens. The young king's mornings are filled with lessons, his afternoons, with military briefings, his nights, with questions of loyalty and survival. Louis's growth into kingship marks a shift. Monarchic authority becomes less about personal charm and more about institutional control. The crown will increasingly rely on ministers who can administer, spy, and enforce the blueprint of modern monarchy. The Huguenot stronghold at La Rochelle challenges royal control. The siege is more than a military contest, it is a test of whether the crown can suppress autonomous power bases. When the city falls, the message is clear: the monarchy will tolerate religion, but it will not tolerate political independence. The palace responds. Nobles who once raised private armies find their leverage reduced. Central administrators and royal governors expand their reach into provinces. State capacity grows, and with it, the expectation that the monarchy can govern without being undone by feudal fragments. After Richelieu comes Mazarin, another minister who consolidates the ministerial model. He shepherds the young Louis XIV through crisis, including the Fronde uprisings that show how dangerous noble power can be when unleashed. The Fronde's mornings are riotous: barricades, petitions, and desperate aristocrats. The monarchy learns a hard lesson: public spectacle and palace ritual can pacify many, but only institutional control, courts, finances, and loyal professional armies will prevent repeated breakdown. These decades harden a monarchic resolve: the throne will be absolute, but absolute in a new, bureaucratic key. Louis XIV emerges from the crucible with a radical idea: if royal power must be absolute, then let it be staged, relentlessly, magnificently, and irresistibly. He will not merely rule, he will perform rule. The morning of his adult reign begins with ritual detail, servants choreographed, dress ceremonials precise, and every gesture turning into political theater. This is the beginning of Versailles as a political machine: gardens that control noble movement, apartments that absorb ambition into courtly competition, and a calendar of spectacle that transforms political dependence into a quest for royal favor. Louis XIV begins his personal rule in 1661 with a declaration that shocks ministers: he will govern alone. No chief minister, no intermediary, no one between the king and France. The young monarch understands power as performance, and he builds a monarchy that communicates authority from morning until midnight. His day becomes a living constitution. The lever, rising ceremony, the audiences, the councils, the walks, the suppers, and the coucher, evening ceremony. When Louis rises, France rises. When Louis eats, France watches. When Louis nods, Europe reacts. This is monarchy turned into choreography. Versailles begins as a hunting lodge. Under Louis XIV, it becomes a world. A palace, a government headquarters, a social theater, a prison of privilege. The king invites the nobility to live near him. Not for their comfort, but for their containment. In Versailles, everything is intentional. The long hallway forces nobles to walk under royal portraits. The gardens reflect geometric royal order. The mirrors multiply the king's image 100-fold. Nobles compete not for land or armies, but for moments. Holding the king's gloves, handing him a shirt, standing closest to his chair. This controlled competition breaks feudal independence and anchors aristocrats to the court. Louis XIV dresses like a monarch who understands symbolism. He makes fashion political: elaborate wigs, red heels, silk embroidered with suns. Everything communicates hierarchy. Etiquette becomes a constitution. Rules determine who touches the king's sleeve, who speaks first, who walks behind whom. Nobles memorize hundreds of regulations. The order of carriages, the sequence of bowing, the method of addressing ministers, the timing of entering a room. Versailles becomes an engine that transforms aristocrats into courtiers and courtiers into dependents. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, Louis's financial mastermind, turns France into a managed economy. He builds industries, encourages global trade, reforms taxation, and centralizes everything that can be centralized. Workshops of luxury cloth, tapestries, glass, and porcelain rise across France. Roads are rebuilt. Harbors expanded. The navy quadrupled. Colbert's day begins with spreadsheets of the 17th century, ledgers, tariffs, customs reports. Louis's vision of grandeur rests on numbers, and Colbert provides the arithmetic. In 1685, Louis XIV revokes the Edict of Nantes. What was once religious tolerance becomes persecution. Protestant churches are destroyed, pastors exiled, and children taken from parents to be raised Catholic. Hundreds of thousands flee to England, Prussia, the Dutch Republic, and the Americas. France loses merchants, craftsmen, bankers, scholars, the economic lifeblood Colbert tried to cultivate. The revocation becomes a stain on Louis's legacy, a decision driven by piety, pressure, and the illusion that unity requires uniformity. Louis XIV's foreign policy is the restless heartbeat of his reign. He wages war for borders, prestige, dynastic claims, and European dominance. The War of Devolution. The Dutch War. The War of the League of Augsburg. And the War of the Spanish Succession stretch France's resources and patience. Battlefields from Flanders to Italy echo with cannon fire. Marshals like Turenne and Vauban become legends. Fortresses rise along borders like stone constellations. But by the early 1700s, the cost becomes unbearable. The treasury cracks, families starve, and France's glory becomes a burden. Despite his theatrical magnificence, Louis XIV is deeply human. Disciplined, hardworking, religious, proud, sensitive to flattery, and burdened by loss. He outlives his son, grandson, and great-grandson. His evenings in old age are heavy with grief. Court gossip softens, replaced by anxieties about succession. He dies in 1715 after 72 years on the throne. The longest reign in European history before modern times. The Sun King sets, leaving Europe transformed. Louis XV becomes king at 5 years old. The court returns to Paris. Philippe d'Orléans governs as regent, clever, charming, and scandalous. Scientific salons bloom. The arts flourish. But the regency is unstable. Financial experiments collapse. Scandals erupt. And factions multiply. France, tired of war, enters an age of glittering elegance and underlying fragility. Louis XV grows into a handsome, polite monarch beloved by the people. But he is indecisive, easily influenced, and increasingly withdrawn. He prefers private life to public rule. He delegates, procrastinates, and retreats from responsibility. Where Louis XIV was a sun, Louis XV is a candle, flickering, warm, but dim. The monarchy still dazzles, but now it wobbles. Jean Antoinette Poussin, Madame de Pompadour, becomes Louis XV's closest companion, advisor, and artistic patron. She is brilliant, witty, politically savvy, and deeply influential. She shapes foreign policy, patronizes philosophers, oversees palace renovations, and directs cultural life. Under Pompadour, Rococo blooms. The arts flourish. Porcelain factories thrive. The Enlightenment gains a foothold. Her enemies accuse her of everything from extravagance to witchcraft, but she remains indispensable. The 7 Years' War exposes France's weaknesses. Colonies fall. Navies sink. Territory is lost. Debt rises. Confidence collapses. The French people begin to question the monarchy. Why has France lost so much? Why are taxes crushing the poor? Why are the nobles exempt? Why does the king seem absent? Enlightenment thinkers sharpen their pens. The public sphere awakens. Louis XV dies in 1774, largely unpopular, a stark contrast to the adoration of his youth. Whispers about the monarchy's future echo in salons and streets. France is entering a new era. A young king. A new queen. A mountain of debt. And a public increasingly critical of royal privilege. The Bourbons do not yet know it, but the storm clouds of revolution are already gathering. In 1774, a quiet, thoughtful young king takes the throne. Louis XVI, only 19, inherits a kingdom drowning in debt, bruised by defeat, and simmering with frustration. He means well. He is gentle, studious, honest, a man who wanted to fix clocks, not empires. His mornings often begin with mechanical sketches, astronomy notes, or hunting plans, not political calculation. Beside him stands Marie Antoinette, the teenage Austrian princess sent to secure an alliance. Charming but unprepared for the rigid protocols of Versailles, she becomes both adored and resented the moment she arrives. The new reign begins with hope, reforms promised, corruption targeted, and a fresh start in royal manners. But beneath the optimism lies an old monster. France owes more money than the crown can count, and the entire social order is built to prevent fixing it. Marie Antoinette wants to be loved. She laughs easily, dances beautifully, writes tender letters, and avoids politics at first. But Versailles is a jungle dressed in silk. Every gesture becomes gossip. Every purchase becomes scandal. Every mistake becomes legend. She builds a small retreat, the Petit Trianon, to escape court suffocation. But the public interprets it as isolation, arrogance, and foreign influence. In pamphlets sold in Paris streets, she becomes the Austrian woman, the spendthrift, the serpent, the foreign queen. Rarely has a queen been judged so harshly, so quickly. Across the Atlantic, colonies rise against Britain. The opportunity is irresistible. France can strike at its old enemy and reclaim its pride. Louis XVI hesitates, then agrees. French ships sail. French money flows. French officers, including the young Lafayette, cross the ocean to aid the American cause. Victory returns glory to France, but disaster to the treasury. Supporting liberty abroad brings bankruptcy at home. When fireworks celebrate American independence in Paris, the crowd cheers. But the accountants tremble. France is richer in honor, poorer in coin, and closer to crisis. Louis XVI appoints ministers who see the crisis clearly. Turgot, Necker, Calonne, brilliant men, ambitious plans. They propose: cut spending, tax nobles, reform the corvée, reorganize finances, rebuild credit. But every reform meets the same enemy: privilege. Nobles refuse taxation. Parliaments refuse laws. Courtiers sabotage proposals. Louis wants to help, but he fears confrontation. The king hesitates. The queen distrusts reformists. The court plots. The people grow restless. France becomes a furnace, heating slowly, then rapidly. In 1787, Louis calls the assembly of notables, princes, bishops, nobles, hoping the elite will accept reform. They do not. They point fingers at ministers. They question accounts. They deny responsibility. The message becomes clear. The privileged classes will not sacrifice. Louis dismisses some, appoints others, and the political storm grows louder. Paris begins discussing words never heard in royal corridors: bankruptcy, abuses, oppression, representation. The monarchy is losing control of the narrative. Outside Versailles, the crisis becomes life-threatening. Harvests fail. Bread prices soar. Mothers fight for loaves. Workers riot in marketplaces. Pamphlets accuse the queen of hoarding grain. Louis and Marie Antoinette live behind walls of gold, but cannot escape the sound of hunger. France is turning from a monarchy into a pressure cooker by 1788. France is broke. Not metaphorically, literally. There is no money to run the government. Louis XVI makes a historic decision. Call the Estates General, a medieval assembly that has not met since 1614. He intends a controlled discussion. Instead, he opens the gates to revolution. Across France, towns erupt in debate. Pamphlets explode in circulation. Delegates draft lists of grievances. The Third Estate, commoners, demands equality. The monarchy has awakened a sleeping giant. When the Third Estate is locked out of its meeting hall, they march to a nearby indoor tennis court. There, in the sweltering June heat, they swear an oath not to disband until France has a constitution. This moment, tense, defiant, electric, transforms subjects into citizens. Louis wavers. Should he crush them? Should he negotiate? Should he retreat? His hesitation becomes fatal. The monarchy is now sharing the stage with the people, and the people refuse to leave. July 14, 1789. The medieval fortress of the Bastille stands guard over Paris, a symbol of royal authority. Crowds gather, angry and armed. Negotiations break down. Shots ring out. Cannons roar. After hours of fighting, the fortress falls. The head of its governor is paraded on a pike. The monarchy is stunned. This is no riot, it is revolution. Paris declares itself sovereign. Louis bows to reality and wears the tricolor cockade. But the ground beneath him has cracked. It will never solidify again. Rumors spread across the countryside. Nobles hiring brigands, foreign armies marching, conspiracies brewing. Peasants panic. They arm themselves, burn manor archives, attack tax collectors. France descends into rural chaos. To calm the nation, the National Assembly meets on August 4th and takes a historic decision. Abolish feudalism. Centuries of privilege vanish in hours. The Bourbon world, the world of nobles owning justice, land rights, dues, and exemptions, vanishes in a single night of speeches. October 1789. Women of Paris march demanding bread. Men join. Revolutionary militias follow. Soon a sea of humanity, tens of thousands, walks toward Versailles. They storm the palace. Guards fall. The Queen's chambers are invaded. The King and Queen barely escape with their lives. By sunset, the message is unmistakable. The monarchy will no longer rule from afar. The King will return to Paris, under the eyes of the people. Louis and Marie Antoinette are escorted back, surrounded by a singing, shouting crowd. The revolution now owns the monarchy. Louis XVI and his family move into the Tuileries Palace in Paris, guarded and watched, no longer rulers but symbols. The king works with the assembly but is distrusted. The queen is insulted daily in pamphlets. Royal children play behind guarded gates. The monarchy survives, but only barely. By 1791, the royal family feels trapped in the Tuileries. They fear revolutionaries, mobs, and the new constitution that strips the crown of authority. Advisors whisper escape plans. Allies warn that time is running out. Just before midnight, disguised in plain clothes, the king, queen, and their children slip into a waiting coach. The horses gallop toward the Belgian border, toward hope for safety, foreign allies, and a chance to undo the revolution. But Louis is slow, indecisive, too gentle for the ruthlessness the moment demands. The royal coach moves heavily, stopping often, attracting attention. At Varennes, a postmaster recognizes the king's face from a coin. The escape collapses. The royal family is arrested, paraded back to Paris as prisoners of the nation. The people forgive many things. Treason is not one of them. After Varennes, Louis XVI is no longer a father figure, he is a suspect. He swears to uphold the new constitution, but the nation sees doubt in his eyes. His daily routine becomes mechanical. Sign papers, receive ministers, pretend to rule. Marie Antoinette writes secret letters to foreign courts seeking rescue. Revolutionary clubs speak openly of removing the king. Crowds boo as the royal carriage passes. The monarchy still exists, but as a shadow behind bars of paper and suspicion. Austria and Prussia threaten to intervene on behalf of the French crown. Revolutionaries fear invasion. Moderates fear collapse. Radicals see opportunity. France declares war in 1792. The early battles go badly. Troops desert, officers flee, commanders hesitate. The people blame the king. How can a monarch fight a war against his own relatives? How can he defend a revolution he never supported? Paris becomes a furnace of paranoia and rage. August 10, 1792. Armed citizens and National Guardsmen attack the Tuileries Palace. The king's Swiss guards fight bravely but are overwhelmed. Blood stains the marble floors. Louis XVI takes refuge in the Legislative Assembly. For the first time in French history, a king abandons his palace and seeks safety among elected representatives. The assembly suspends the monarchy. The king is imprisoned in the Temple Tower. The Bourbon Dynasty, rulers for more than 170 years, collapses in a single day. The convention puts Louis on trial, not as a king, as a citizen named Capet. The courtroom vibrates with speeches, accusations, documents, and silence heavy as iron. Louis listens calmly, defending himself with dignity. The verdict comes: guilty of conspiring against the freedom of the nation. The sentence: death. The monarchy has fallen. Now the man must fall. January 21, 1793. Louis is taken to the scaffold in the Place de la Revolution. He tries to speak. "I forgive those who are the cause of my death." But drums drown his words. The blade falls. A cheer rises. Some weep. Others chant. The Bourbon monarchy, once Europe's most dazzling throne, dies in seconds. Marie Antoinette's world shrinks to a prison cell. Her children are taken from her. Her hair turns white. Her letters become increasingly soft, almost trembling. Her trial is brutal, public, and merciless. Pamphleteers mock her. Accusers invent horrors. She remains dignified, refusing to cry. On October 16, 1793, she rides to the scaffold in an open cart. No jewels. No silks. Only courage. France watches the end of a queen who once dazzled Europe. Into the chaos rises a young Corsican officer, Napoleon Bonaparte. Brilliant, ambitious, tireless. The revolution eats its leaders: Robespierre, Danton, Desmoulins, all fall. But Napoleon climbs. By 1799 he seizes power. By 1804 he becomes Emperor of the French. France has traded a king who could not decide for an emperor who decides everything. Napoleon reshapes Europe through war, law, and iron will. But even he cannot erase the old royal name. After Napoleon's defeat in 1814, the great powers restore the Bourbon Dynasty. First Louis XVIII, brother of Louis XVI, takes the throne. He wears the crown cautiously, balancing old royal pride with post-revolutionary realities. Then Charles X rises, nostalgic, absolutist, unwilling to bend. He tries to turn back the clock, restore old privileges, strengthen the church, weaken the press, silence the assembly. But the world has changed. France will not return to 1788. In July 1830, Charles X tries to dissolve the chamber, muzzle the press, and restore absolute control. Paris erupts. Barricades rise. Workers, students, and citizens fight in the streets. The tricolor flag returns. The monarchy collapses. Charles X flees. The Bourbon line, the direct line of Louis XIV and Louis XVI, ends its reign forever. A new king rises, Louis Philippe, from a junior branch. But even he will fall in 1848. The age of Bourbon kings is over. The Bourbon story spans heroes and failures. Henry IV's pragmatism. Louis XIV's magnificence. Louis XV's fragility. Louis XVI's tragedy. They gave Europe Versailles, classical art, centralized governance, and cultural brilliance. But they also resisted reform, clung to privilege, and underestimated their people. Their rise shaped modern France. Their fall reshaped the world. The dynasty's story is both a monument and a warning. Power that refuses to change is power doomed to collapse. Thank you for watching History Without Sleep. If you like my video, then please like, comment, and subscribe the channel.